Everyone knows how the season ended last year. We don't need to talk about it. But going into this last offseason, the Mavericks didn't really have a lot to look forward to. They lost their guy in Brunson. We did get Kyrie, so that was great to see. Not a lot else to look forward to as far as other players on the roster. The Mavericks in the season in such a bad spot that they actually end up getting the 10th pick instead of sending it to the Knicks, I believe. I can't remember. And boy, did that pick turn this franchise around. Nico sends that pick and Davis Bertans a terrible contract to the Thunder to receive the 8th pick in Derek Lively. And doing that, they create a trade exception, absorb Rashawn Holmes' contract, and in doing that, also receiving back Olivier Maxence Prosper from the Kings. And so after the offseason, we got to re-sign Kyrie, secure that, got some young players, got Holmes, which was more of a taking on his contract to receive the pick type of deal. A lot of people thought that Holmes was actually a solution at center. Holmes is sadly not the player he used to be. Essentially, to wrap up the offseason, the Mavericks basically took a really bad ending to the season and turned that into Derek Lively and Olivier Maxence Prosper, and then the contract of Rashawn Holmes, which we'll talk about in a minute, what they were able to do with that. So it doesn't look too bad to start off the Nico Harrison campaign. We got 1-7-1, great athlete, huge wingspan, great rim roller, phenomenal pick at number 8 in Derek Lively, and we also get essentially just a throw-in in Olivier Maxence Prosper, who has shown lots of potential as a wing defender, as just a versatile big body in general, that we have a lot to look forward to in him. It's looking like a pretty great start for Nico Harrison, I would say. Fast forward to today, where we are currently in the 2023-24 NBA season, just past the trade deadline. We're going to go over the magic that Nico was able to continue to unfold in this past trade deadline that just occurred. The first trade that came through was Daniel Gafford for Rashawn Holmes, and we didn't understand what the compensation and the draft picks was going to look like in that trade until later in the day, and it turns out to be a pick swap with OKC, which in turn gave us a pick to send for Gafford. Daniel Gafford, at the very least, is a top 5 backup big in the league, and honestly, going through the list, you might take Isaiah Hartenstein over him. I wouldn't take Daniel Tice over him. Obviously, Naz Reid, I would probably take Naz Reid over Daniel Gafford, but suffice to say, there's not a lot of backup bigs better than Daniel Gafford. He is 6'10", a great athlete, great rim roller. He's currently averaging 11, 8, and 2 blocks per game. That's better averages than our current starting center, by the way. Obviously, Lively is 19. We know what he is going to be in the future. Right now, in this current day, Daniel Gafford does have a slight edge to Lively on both defense and offense. Other than Lively does have that playmaking instinct, just natural playmaking in the short roll. And whenever Luka gets blitzed, like down the lane, Lively's really good at finding the open shooter. Haven't really seen a lot of Gafford in that situation just because there's not really anyone on the Wizards that's going to get blitzed on a regular basis. But so far, comparing the two, they're really similar, but Gafford is a fantastic pickup for our backup big position. The Mavericks have a legitimate strength in their center position. This is something that I don't think I could have ever envisioned myself saying. It is phenomenal to see. Gafford is a great pickup for the Mavs. I don't know why the whole discourse around the Mavericks moves has only revolved around PJ Washington when Gafford is honestly this season the better player. I think PJ for the Mavs is going to look a lot better than he did for the Hornets, but currently how their play had looked throughout the season, Gafford had the better season than PJ up to this point. Gafford really just allows us, one, if Lively's out, which he's dealt with a lot of freak injuries this season, not really, I wouldn't call him an injury-prone guy, but he has dealt with several injuries this season that have kept him out, and mostly due to, honestly, not caring from opposing defenders swiping his legs out under him and getting punched in the face. Thank you, Trailblazers. But yeah, Lively, he's going to have to sit some games, and Gafford is an insane spot center to back him up whenever he's not there. And Gafford as a starter is going to be a very solid starting big, but whenever he's coming off the bench, he's going to be one of the best backup bigs in the league, which that gives the Mavericks so much depth and allows them to do so much with their lineups. And not to mention 48 minutes of fantastic center play the Mavericks are going to get to watch. Mavericks fans, you will get to watch 48 minutes of phenomenal center play on this roster. It's just a beautiful sight to see. I can't believe I'm saying that. When I saw the Gafford trade go through, my first thought was like, if this is it, this is still a good trade deadline. Like, Gafford was such a big pickup for us. The next trade was Grant Williams, our 2027 top 2 protected first round pick for PJ Washington. And I've heard a lot of back and forth on this trade. I mean, if you're not a Mavericks fan and haven't watched Grant Williams this season, you might have that kind of opinion. But Grant Williams over the last 40 games averaged 6 points, 3 rebounds, and shot 28% from 3. When on offense, pretty much all he's giving you is floor spacing. And he did not give any spacing this season whatsoever. Grant was absolutely not a hit. I think Grant is still a player that could be good in a role for other teams. Maybe the spotlight was just too bright for him in Dallas. Dallas was kind of asking him to be a top 5 guy on the team whenever his role previously had really been that 7th or 8th guy. So yeah, losing Grant is honestly more of a benefit to the Mavericks than a loss at this point in the season, and I really don't understand the standpoint of, oh, Grant Williams and a first for basically getting another Grant Williams back. No, listen, PJ Washington is infinitely more versatile on offense than Grant Williams. Yeah, PJ's shooting splits are down this season. I think he's only shooting like 33% from 3. PJ Washington has had to bail the Hornets out of so many late shot clock situations because he was with LaMelo out. PJ's one of the only guys who can attack a closeout and get to the rim. He's a good slasher. He's a really solid team defender. I know so many defensive advanced analytics are against PJ Washington, but sit down and watch the film. He puts a lot of effort in. He attacks closeouts well. He doesn't leave the ground super hard. He doesn't attack them too aggressively. He stays on the ground, stays low. He can chase guys off the three-point line decently. He's got a 7'2" wingspan as a 6'7" wing, so he definitely has the length to keep guys in front of him. You're not going to get around him super easily. He's a really good connector on offense and a pretty solid connector on defense when you have the defensive players around him. He's not a lockdown guy. He's also not nearly as bad on defense as people have been saying he is on YouTube and Twitter. He's just an overall upgrade in every single category from Grant Williams. So as far as this trade goes, yeah, you don't want to lose the first. You want to keep that first to make a bigger trade in the offseason. I get it. But at the end of the day, both positions you upgraded in for the Mavericks organization, they went out and got exactly the pieces that they said they needed. And overall, it's a complete upgrade for the roster. Basically, what you're sending out is Richaun Holmes. Richaun Holmes, who was not playing for the team at all, in the minutes he gave you were pretty poor, other than for some reason when we were matched up with the Lakers, Richaun Holmes would go off. But other than that, Richaun Holmes, he's pretty much cooked. So you trade him for Gafford. You swap picks with OKC, allows you to trade a pick to Washington for Gafford. Essentially, swapping picks, OKC, you're not losing a pick. It's just you're probably going to end up with the worst pick out of the two of those. Net, you lose Richaun Holmes, that pick swap. Grant Williams, who has been a terrible fit. He has not worked at all other than the first 8 games of the season. Just overall, very bad for the Mavericks. There's a lot of reports coming out that Grant Williams wasn't exactly preferred, or players weren't exactly fond of him in the locker room. From his personality and how much I've seen him talk, I could totally understand where the guys on the Mavericks roster are coming from. I mean, he likes to talk a lot, and his play this season, from how much he talked, did not really back up his words. But yeah, I mean, take PJ Washington, essentially averaging more than double the points that Grant was giving us. Even PJ on his, I think this is either his worst or second worst 3-point shooting season when his volume's also at his highest. It's still leagues better than Grant Williams shooting this season. Like 33%, kind of approaching league average on 6 attempts. 6 attempts is heavy volume for a 25-30 minute a game guy. And Grant Williams was shooting 28% on 3 attempts, I believe. So pretty big upgrade there, even with PJ having a down season. I'm trying to point out that basically in every category, PJ Washington is an upgrade from Grant Williams. They are not just interchangeable players. PJ Washington is taller, he's longer, he's faster, he's going to connect better on defense, and he's going to connect better on offense. In every single category, PJ Washington is better than Grant Williams. The Mavericks also send out a first in that, and obviously that's where all the discourse comes from. Listen, no one questions when the Lakers trade out first-round picks to get overall players back to the team to have a playoff run for LeBron. So why does everyone question the Mavericks trading one first-round pick for PJ Washington for Luka to be happy and go further in the playoffs? It adds so much depth to this team that the team did not have. I just don't understand where people are coming from with that. Like, the Mavericks have 2 more picks they can trade in the offseason. They have multiple young players now that they can trade. They have, I believe it's 4 or 5 second-round picks they now also have that they can trade in the offseason. That's a decent amount of draft capital, and that's a decent amount of contracts with good players on them. There's not really any downside to this whatsoever other than losing the one first for a great overall trade deadline. Like, what else do you want? Like, what are people so upset about? Like, that's a phenomenal trade to me. In every way, the Mavericks roster has a complete and total upgrade. There's just really not a downside. There's a little risk added to it because it's the 2027 pick. Outside of that, it's just a phenomenal move. Like, at the bare minimum, this is an A- move, and I saw this listed as a loss for the Mavs in so many videos and so many articles, and I'm just so baffled by it. I don't understand what people are seeing. Like, Gafford alone makes this trade deadline a good trade deadline. So PJ Washington adding all of that offensive versatility and not hurting you on defense from where you were at. He's not necessarily lifting your defense, but he's not hurting you at all, and he still adds more size. He's going to give you more rebounds than Grant. He's going to give you more points. He's going to score them more efficiently. He's going to connect the offense a lot better than Grant. He can attack closeouts. He's a good slasher. He has a lot more moves on offense, and he's going to knock down some shots for the Mavs. Did I mention that Gafford and PJ are both 25? So I believe Grant's he's either 25 or 26, so you're not really losing much on that. But Holmes is 31 or 32, I believe, and he's completely cooked. So upgrading from Holmes to Gafford is a massive leap, and upgrading from Grant to PJ is still a very sizable leap. In every feasible context I can think of, the Mavericks definitely upgraded at this trade deadline. Don't understand where all this discourse is coming from. Just sit back, relax, watch the Mavericks the rest of the season. If they get healthy, they might be able to push it to the 6th or 5th seed. Okay, let's get on to the bench depth. Obviously, the presumed starting lineup is going to be Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Josh Green, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, when healthy. And then that leaves the bench to be one of either, well, okay, let's speculate a little bit. What if Spencer Dinwiddie signs with the Mavericks? One, I understand he's also having a bad shooting year. Spencer Dinwiddie, a year and a half ago, had his best season of his career on the Mavericks, shooting 41% from 3 and averaged 18 points per game and 6 assists. Okay, I promise you, if Dinwiddie comes back to the Mavs, that he obviously the volume is not going to be there. We have Kyrie Irving, yes, but Dinwiddie's still going to put up a much more efficient 13-ish points per game than he was on the Nets, mostly because he's not going to have to bail the Mavs out of hardly any possessions, really. Okay, so we're going to assume Dinwiddie signs with the Mavs. I know that's obviously not something you can just assume, but it's really between the Mavs and the Lakers, and I really like the Mavericks' chance of signing him. So we're going to assume Dinwiddie signs back. Pre-assuming Dinwiddie's back, our backup five-man lineup, which best part of this trade, we have two five-man lineups that are legitimately playable on an NBA court. Never thought I would say that as a Mavericks fan. But backup right now would be Hardy, Tim, Exum, Maxey, Gafford. And behind Gafford, you also have Powell. Behind Maxey, you also have Omax. So by far and away, the deepest roster the Mavericks have ever had in my entire lifespan of watching them. I would say even, obviously, like comparing them to 2011, that roster was fairly deep, and that was a big part of how they were able to play so well. But there was a lot of 7-8 man lineups. As far as regular season goes, from 1 to 10 or 1 to even the 12 spot, this is by far and large the most deep roster the Mavericks have had since I started watching them. Now, bring back Dinwiddie into the conversation if we are able to sign him. That adds so much versatility to your bench. Phenomenal versatility. Dinwiddie, I understand, is having not the best season and a lot of issues on the Nets previously before the deadline. But he's still averaging 6 assists and like 1.5 turnovers. Like, pretty solid bench playmaker, if I do say. Pretty solid bench playmaker in Spencer Dinwiddie. And we've seen it before. If you're a Mavs fan watching this, Dinwiddie plays very well in Dallas, plays very well with Luka, already knows everything he needs to know. Now, go back to where I was talking about the 5-man lineup off the bench and the 5-man lineup in the starting lineup. The Mavericks have been extremely injured. Luka, Lively, Kyrie together have played around 18 games this season together. The Mavericks most likely will probably continue to deal with injuries. So Dinwiddie off the bench as your backup playmaker is one of the best playmakers off the bench in the entire league. So that gives us two guys off the bench that are some of the best at their position off the bench in the league. That also has Tim Hardaway Jr. We have retained Tim Hardaway Jr. and Josh Green and Omax and Hardy. So off the bench, we also have Timmy. He's averaging, I believe, the most points off the bench this season for a team. So obviously, if you watched my first video on Tim, you know my opinion on Tim. I'm a little bit more lax now. It's not freshly off of a loss where Tim took 20 shots and had like 5 points or whatever the reason I made that video for. But Tim off the bench, that still adds a lot of scoring versatility. The ceiling is higher with Tim off the bench because, you know, if he's hitting, he could drop 30 in 25 minutes, and that is a lot of scoring to come off the bench, especially adding in Dinwiddie and Gafford. And then you still have Maxey and Derek Jones Jr. On the bench for defensive versatility. That's a lot of wings. That's a lot of guards who can score. And not to mention, you have bare minimum at least the third best player in the league on your team in Luka Doncic. That's a big difference from where the Mavericks organization was just a year and a half ago before trading for Kyrie Irving, or even in the offseason. This is by far and away a much better roster than where we were even after the end of the offseason. Can I also mention my dub I got from my trade deadline video? Proposed Gafford and Washington in that video, and we got both of them. I don't really want to look back at it and see what the trade offers were and how the whole trade I proposed went down, but keep in mind, but I did in sort of a way get the half dub on my trade deadline predictions or proposals. I can't remember what I called it. So moving forward, this Mavericks roster, I could honestly see them ending up at the 5th seed. I think we're like 6 or 7 games behind the 5th seed, but look at the Mavs right now. They're currently on a 3-game win streak. Coming up, they've got the Thunder on Saturday. We're hopeful to have Gafford and PJ on the court for Saturday, and possibly Derek Lively back. Kind of doubtful. There's been a lot of back and forth on that, but he did just have surgery on Tuesday, so he might have to come back Monday. But either way, we'll still have a starting caliber center on the court. Daniel Gafford. Can't believe I'm saying that right now. Man, that feels good to have a great backup center. We have insurance for injuries. which we need plenty of because the Dallas Mavericks know how to maintain injury reports. Keep them things full. What a trade deadline for the Dallas Mavericks. I think it's a win in every sense of the word. Regardless if PJ Washington can get his efficiency up or not, he's still an upgrade from Grant Williams. I don't care what anyone says, he is an upgrade. Gafford is obviously a huge upgrade from Richaun Holmes. The rest of the season is going to be a dream, and I can't wait to make more videos on it. So subscribe to that